Well, thanks everybody for coming this afternoon. I'm pretty excited to have Patti here and to have this conversation. This is the second in our three-part webinar leading into our Innovative Community of Practice project, where we're using a multidisciplinary team to dive deep into issues impacting the well-being of farmers and the agriculture industry professionals. So we recognize that the majority of Alberta farms are small to medium-sized businesses with few employees and strong ties to family. And so farm business decisions often have that heart and head component to them. Feedback from our network engagements and from the business professionals that we've been talking to and from our farm counseling network, like the feedback that we're getting from there and what people are reaching out for counseling for, indicates that the multi-generational conversations around farm business are a huge barrier for people, and it's the main reason that they're reaching out for help from our counseling network. So I'm super excited to have Patti Durand here today to provide some insights and have a discussion from her experience. For those who don't know Patti, she's from Humboldt, Saskatchewan, and has an agronomist background, and she's skilled with family enterprise advising and coaching, but her experience reaches beyond just Saskatchewan. So for any of those that haven't heard you before, Patti, can you give us a little bit of background about your experience maybe across Canada?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. This is, I've been looking forward to this. Anytime there's a conversation that's basically around a community or with a community is a good day, because then it's customized information that goes out. My background, I was lucky enough to be one of two people that was co-leading a pilot that was trying to figure out what we could do to help families in transition. And it was something that was at Farm Credit Canada. And in that time, we spent a lot of time kind of hypothesizing, like, what's holding families back? And then we put it to work. And so in 5 years, I spent time with over 350 farm families, and I became a student of what helps people take action, but also simultaneously what holds them back. And so it has been, I would say, soup to nuts, farms that are, say, as small as 500 acres, as large as 50,000 acres, in debt up to their eyeballs, with with cash falling out of their pockets, young, old, large, small, quite rural, close to urban. And there were some common threads that emerged. And it's part of why I'm really excited to share some of those insights about what I know to be helpful.
So through our needs assessment and our ongoing engagement with farmers in the industry, we hear all the time about farm transition discussions and business planning, and it always stops at that farm family dynamics. They talk about this all the time, but nobody really dives into what are the farm family dynamics, like what is actually stopping people. There is a pretty big emotional investment we hear with working with farmers when you're working on the heart side of things and the business side of things and trying to make the two mesh. So from all of that vast experience you have, what would you say are some of the things that are impacting through those farm family dynamics and stopping people from getting the help that they need?
So this is such a large topic that I wrote a book about it, because I recognize this is not a webinar. This is not a keynote. This is not something you can just put in a pamphlet. And so I'll make a nod. Just the Future Leader, the Successor's Guide to Family Business Leadership, is everything I wish successors in particular knew. What they're about to encounter with regards to family dynamics is the intersection and collision of history and legacy, but the baggage that goes with it, because there was often concern, scarcity, trauma along the way, together with lack of helpful language around clarity, expectations, and conflict resolution. And then you add in the layer that people are living longer than they ever have in history, together with farm values, assets that are, the dial has cranked, they are so much more valuable, and so there's that much more on the line. It makes sense that this is hard. It makes sense that there is no one way to do this. And ultimately, I just feel these families are smart, experienced people, but they've never done this before. And it makes sense it would be challenging.
Yeah. And we hear a lot about that. Like, I often get farmers that phone me and they're like, "Who is that transition guy? Because my son came back and they have this little bit of a story and they just don't know where to get started. And they're looking for those professionals that can just like solve it all for them.
Mhm.
And it seems to be a little bit more complicated than just going to a professional, checking off some boxes and walking away. And in our survey, actually, it's really interesting because we have farm business professionals that do the survey and they kind of talk about what they think farmers need and what kind of professionals and who should support them. And then we contrast that with the same questions asking the farmers, and they all say accountants. Like that's it. We just need an accountant that gives us a little roadmap, and then we're done. And it's kind of it's different, right?
I'm gonna insert. So
Yeah,
here's the thing: is that the reality is that often they don't know what they don't know, and so
yeah,
for most farms across the board, and I would say this is for family businesses, an accountant tends to be the advisor that they most consistently have and probably most consistently talk to. But they fail to acknowledge or recognize that there are other professionals with expertise that they could use in this process. They just don't even know who they are or what lines
called.
connect.
Yeah,
Even within
yeah,
accounting, I would say a general practitioner is not unlike your family doctor. Absolutely appropriate and skilled and able in annual tax returns and advising in tax efficiency. However, delving into some of the nuances around farm transition, delving into some of the tax planning strategies, that's a specialty. You would never go to your family doctor to, God forbid, remove a brain tumor.
yeah.
You can't go to your general accountant and ask them to necessarily assume they'll be able to do this type of thing. Some will, some have very robust experience, but it's a great conversation to have. We are looking at this plan and implementing a successor in the next 10 to 15 years, 5 years, whatever your number is. Are you equipped to be able to guide us through that process? And if not, who would you recommend? Beautiful question to ask. And it can open up all kinds of great conversations because people are waiting for their accountant at times to like tell them what the plan is. And my analogy is this: asking your accountant or your professional to make the plan is the equivalent of taking up your iPhone and saying, Siri, tell me where to go. If you don't know your
Wow.
destination, the way you get
Yeah.
there doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So they need to have a take ownership is the opportunity of what they want their desired outcome to look like. And then their professionals can help them to implement it.
Yeah. And I think that's a common misconception. Like if you don't know where to start, you just grab your professional and hope that they can answer all the questions for you. So having that idea in your head and coming with that to the conversation is pretty big. One of the common themes that we heard from professionals. So we did our needs assessment. We talked to farmers. We talked to mental health practitioners, and we have our own counseling network here at Agno, and they answer some questions about the main themes or topics that farmers are reaching out for. So we know that the family dynamics and that farm transition discussion ends up being part of most of the conversations that are happening with our counseling network. So we know that that's what farmers are kind of reaching out for help and support for. But when we talk to the farm business professionals, we're like, we have this counseling network, like you can refer clients there and stuff. And so what came out of that conversation is like, okay, yeah, maybe our clients need some help, but as a professional, I could use some support. It takes such an emotional investment to work with people and families, and especially with all the relationships and families, to get them to a place where they can do that business planning. And so they're really limited. They felt they were limited on the number of clients that they can support and help, and that there are so many people looking for help. How do we get more help for people is what they're talking about. So that was one thing about your book, and the idea of your book, behind your book, is sort of equipping both the farmers and the professionals to kind of do some of that and maybe build that extra capacity in the system.
It's true. Like the reality of sitting down for an hour or two, recognizing there's deficiencies in planning or in leadership or in acumen or in competencies or whatever is missing, and to think about how you as an advisor or a professional might influence that. You just don't have time. It's just not realistic. And yet you can see that discrepancy. You could be helpful, but it doesn't match. There's gosh, I have two threads of thought I want to pull on right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Number one, that very much I think about the book as a care package for successors. Here's everything I wish you knew. And it appears on repeat that successors are commonly missing in terms of their own personal development, self-awareness, and things they need to be thinking about. But it's turned out that it's been helping the whole family have these conversations. Thinking about conversations, to ask a professional, accountant, lawyer, someone who is typically not working in the heart business, as you describe, the head and heart, if they're not working in that realm, even suggesting that someone might benefit from a mental health care professional would feel incredibly overwhelming, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And so with our team that I've worked with previously and other people I've coached, we talked about the language. And so this is what it could sound like. When you're witnessing perhaps addictions or someone who is in negative headspace, their language has hopelessness, whatever symptoms you might be seeing. First of all, mental health first aid, highly recommended for every human on the earth. Like it is so good in terms of understanding how to do first response. Linda, I'm not sure if this is your story, but if you need resources or help with this, please know that I can connect you. So you're not diagnosing, you're not assuming, but you open the door to help, which I think as professionals is all we want to do.
Yeah, for sure. And we find that too when we're talking in community events and people come up and they tell us bits of stories and stuff, to be even just open to, hey, I know how to connect you with people. This is a referral service. This is something that we can offer you, is just enough of a window. If they're looking for that support, they jump on it, right? So I find that it's a scary conversation if you've never had it before, but I found most farmers and most people are receptive. I don't know if you notice this, but farmers like to get advice from farm-informed professionals that can answer questions and make things happen. I mean, you can't run a farm without on your own anymore. There's just so many things going on. That professional advice, whether it's your agrologist or your accountant or whatever it is essential for any farm owner operator. And so how I see it and how I present it all the time is that farm informed counselor or therapist or any of those kind of supports is just one more tool in your toolbox to make sure that you can do the best job that you can on your farm. And I find that works really well. Like farmers understand that concept of a professional that understands and it has the answers. I'm willing to take that chance and see where it goes. So yeah,
and
it's really awesome.
might not even be the answers as much as ideas.
Here's ideas. Sorry, yeah.
Here's the options you could be considering.
Yeah,
and the farm informed, I couldn't agree more. There is a risk when someone, especially is coaching, and I think about mental health. I've certainly heard instances where it's like, oh, well, what you need is a 3-week vacation. It's like, I have 400 cattle. Like this is not going to happen, right? And so we have to be able to speak. You don't have to be intimately understanding or know it or have done it, but you have to have, there's an opportunity to have a level of respect and to take the time to understand what is possible in their particular situation. And that's probably, again, that's just being a good human.
Yeah, understanding the circumstances and giving suggestions that actually align with what the needs are. Yeah, it's a pretty important thing. Yeah, no, it's one of the other things that we witnessed, and I guess I have heard from the farm business community when we were engaging with farm business professionals is that lived experience is really key. To being a good advisor professional in agriculture. And because we are only 2% of our population, it's a really small pool of people with lived experience that end up in these professions. So one of the goals of our community of practice and what we hope we can achieve through this multidisciplinary discussion on some of these topics is to glean out some of the key learnings that maybe can be passed on to new entrants that are looking at having or targeting the agriculture clients.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, do you think that we're on the right road with this? Do you think this is something that can be gleaned, or do you think it has to be somebody that's coming from a lived experience?
You know, I think that whether you come from the lived experience or not, that there's an opportunity to be respectful of the situation. And so the way that there could be some common threads that I think would be helpful for a practitioner, whether you've worked with farm families before or not, and someone who has would I think understand these things. So right off the bat, often the nature of the complexity of their operations for our farm clients means that this will almost always take longer than we think it should. We can have very strong opinions as advisors, like do your thing. I gave you the answer. Do it. Yep. Easily said, but incredibly complex when we think about the really deep seasonality of what they're doing, the level of fatigue that goes with that, and the complexity of all the moving parts. And so whenever we're advising, just being mindful of the fact that we are a tiny slice of their life. And if we behave otherwise, that's how it can feel disrespected. Second of all, in general, I know this to be true in terms of from the psychological research I've done and everything that I've seen in terms of study-wise, when we can start from a place of hope, that number one, we believe that our clients are capable of overcoming this or managing it and making progress. So I know you can do this. Only you can do this. How might I help you? Is really foundational and something I repeat frequently, because they will pick up if we think they can't do it. Yeah. They will pick up if we have doubts or sarcasm or hesitancy. And so that language of, you can do this, how can I support you, I think cannot be underestimated. The history in transition, and what I believe to be one of the major barriers in it moving forward, is the fact that the urgency around transition has been sold with fear. If you don't do this plan, you're going to lose your farm, or you're going to lose your family, or you're going to pay a lot of taxes. It's been these negative messages, which there's a abundant research that says that is absolutely contrary to what is actually helpful. It's not too late. We can change our approach and saying, you can do this, and here's what this could look like. Here are some opportunities to navigate this. You are a smart individual. You care. You've just never done this before. So I repeat that because it's true. And if we can say those messages, and then last but not least, the other piece of respect, whether you're from a farming background or not, is the absolute weight of scarcity mindset in terms of protecting the legacy that farms are. It's a lot of intergenerational weight that many farm people feel. Sorry, there's a very long monologue, but I feel so strongly, and I'm so optimistic, because it will take more than what we have right now, and it will take all of us.
And I think that too, that idea that it's not a one and done. It's not like we're going to go do this thing. You have to do it now. Let's get it done. It's a process, right? And it's a journey.
It's
because it's that heart and that head. You might have a good idea, but then it has to translate through all those heart conversations, right? So it just takes time, and to be encouraging, and I'm here for the journey kind of thing, I think is really a positive and important message. So I really appreciate that you're so positive around that and empowering people to make those choices and to investigate it. Because we do know, like the research shows, that if you have a plan and you have a kind of a process and you have something laid out, at least you can react to what's happening around you. And I know that there's a lot of things that come at us as farmers where it's like out of the blue and you have to pivot, right? And so having a plan and some things down solid that you know gives you that peace of mind to know, okay, now I have to make a decision. I've already kind of thought some of this through. And that's actually one of the number one coping strategies or resiliency strategies that farmers around the globe actually use, is that planning piece and reframing things and revisiting things and moving through the process. So it's really awesome to see so many people that are interested in supporting farmers. We're finding that there's a lot more young people and new entrants into agriculture right now that are coming into the colleges that don't have a background in agriculture. So whatever we can do to support them in their transition into the culture of agriculture so that they can be productive professionals and helping is amazing. So really appreciating your book. It's a great resource. So I'm really appreciating that.
What you just commented on, I just want to pick up a thread.
Yeah.
So I think from a mental health professional, I'm very aware that therapy and that type of healing is very much rear view mirror looking, and that a coach approach tends to be more forward looking, which is certainly kind of more my training. And I do think we have that opportunity, even when looking in the rear view mirror, that ability to say, okay, here's where we are now, and what might the future look like? What gives you hope is the one step, but then what else could you do? So that continual reframe and challenging their creative brains to recognize that there's more than one way to do this. And that is certainly a thread that I would say it isn't the research that you're talking about that you have, but in my experience, people seem to at times think that, what's the way to transition?
Yeah.
And that's not how this works. This is a custom job every time. Yeah. Your transition will be unlike any other transition. It is unlikely to be perfect, but it will be most perfect for you. That mindset can be incredibly freeing when they have such an urgency for it to be precise or perfect. Other thing you said about planning, I love a good plan written in pencil.
Yep.
Right?
Erasing.
How can we adjust, right?
Yeah,
it's about having some intentions and laying it out, but also being prepared to adjust on the fly.
Yeah, and that's how I think about it. I actually coach people in forage and livestock systems around drought that way. I have a list in my head, and sometimes it's on paper, of the cows that I will not feed a $200 bale to. And so if the feed prices go that high, there's a few cows going down the road, right? Because I'm not feeding those ones, those expensive bales. So I've already sort of have these like little benchmarks, and we already have this, in this instance, this is when I'm going to pull the trigger. And it gives me a peace of mind to know, because when you get into that, it's drought and the hay prices are going up and you're trying to decide, when do I pull the trigger? When do I sell now? Or is the price is going to go down? And you're trying to, it gives you some like little benchmarks, and you can make those decisions, and you know that you've thought them out previously, and it gives you just a little bit of peace of mind. And I kind of feel that that's how farm transition goes, right? You have this kind of roadmap where you think this is what I'd like it to be. This is what I hope it to be, but able to make some adjustments along the way and curb it to new circumstances. Because, like our kids, they do these crazy things and get married and have other kids, and like it gets messy really fast, right? So there's always these little adjustments that have to happen, and sometimes big adjustments along the way. So just being empowered to have that conversation. And there is a peace of mind that comes from having a plan that you sort of thought through some of that before, so that you're making smaller decisions and not like the whole big overwhelming piece of it, right? So
completely.
Yeah. Well, you must have seen a lot of kind of traditions or themes that came out. Like you worked with farmers across Canada, different sizes. I'm always interested in what these kind of themes and traditions, because those are the pieces that are useful for passing on to either other professionals or having a conversation around, so that when you have farm clients, you're kind of prepared a bit about some of the common things that might be coming out of these conversations. Do you have any thoughts? I have a few of my own that I can test.
Well, you're welcome to go, or I can share a couple. I'm open.
Well, you share a couple, and then I'll throw mine in.
I reflect on common beliefs or assumptions that just aren't serving us any longer, if they ever did.
Right.
So one that comes to mind is that parents in farming situations feel obligated, feel it's their responsibility to come up with a plan of how this is all going to work. And I see flaws in that for a couple of reasons. Number one, trying to do anything in isolation can be really limiting in terms of it's just not enough or robust enough in terms of making good decisions or thinking of possibilities or even being exposed to possibilities. The other part of it is that they're coming up with plans that their successor or children are going to have to implement and live with in the parent's absence. Mm-hmm. Would it not make sense to not necessarily invite the children to have authority at said table, but to have a voice and saying, here's what I'd be open to. Could you think we could do this? And so opening that conversation, as opposed to it being a very secretive and, not to be known until the will is read, which I would say is, I'll call that worst case scenario, where nobody has an opportunity to understand what was coming or prepare for it or get their head around it, as you described, is just old culture that I will, in my opinion, is unhelpful. Another barrier I come across on a regular basis is that every child has an equal right and opportunity
Yeah.
at any time to express and become a successor. And I have witnessed that be unhelpful. If one child is now an adult, they've committed their lives, and all of a sudden another child comes back, and the other one, they get just an open door policy to join at the same level. That's complex for several reasons. And so my encouragement is, what if parents spoke to their children at a younger age and said, this is what we think is possible. There is some room for a successor, but we need to have some advance warning, and we want to let you know what's possible. It's not a carte blanche. It doesn't allow everybody all the time. And perhaps we have some timelines. We ask that you speak up by this age or by our age or date on the calendar so that we can properly prepare, because we have needs from this farm in the long term as well. And so those are two examples where I'm just like, why are we trying to make this work?
But you know what, Patti? I honestly think that a lot of people feel that they've had that conversation. That they've had that conversation with their kids, right? Because the son or the daughter or whatever is working on the farm, they're doing some stuff, and they dream together. They kind of have these conversations about what the future might hold, but they never really solidify what that looks like. And then they go off and do their own dreaming. I know I noticed that with my own son, and he comes back and he's like, wow, Mom, we have the house trailer over there and the big house here. I'm going to come back and I'm going to, do this. And he had this big plan about how when he had kids, we're going to do the old switcheroo, he said. And I can go live in the trailer and he can have the big house. Like he had this whole scenario. And I was like, I'm not sure I want to live in a trailer, but okay. So I think sometimes that we have these conversations and we both have a desire for them to be involved and that sort of thing, but we don't actually get down to the nitty-gritty of what that looks like. So I feel like some people, and they feel like they've had these conversations all along, when actually the actual details and the reality of it have not been discussed in any kind of detail.
Another layer to that is that I know of several parents who I've asked them, I said, have you shared your will? Is your will up to date?
Yep.
If it is, great. Have you shared it with your children? And I said, yes. When? Oh, several years ago. Absolutely know that what is a very impactful and stressful conversation for one person may not even be remembered by the receiver.
By the other one. Yeah.
And so, and vice versa. But there is a reality. As things change, people are born, people die, people get married, people get divorced, the farm grows, the farm goes down in size, whatever those circumstances are, there is value in repeating and coming back to the table. I had one dad who said his practice is January 2nd, every year, he pulls out his will, he hands it out to his kids, he says, read it, do you have any questions? I'm like, wow, who taught you that?
That's amazing. Yeah.
Right? And most years, it's quite a short conversation. Nope, no changes, everything's good. But we assume that once is enough. It just isn't. Circumstances and the amount that we care about it changes because of our life cycle and where we're at. So now, can you share? Can every will be shared? I mean, you know your family best. There is fragility and concerns, but that would be something to work towards. That perhaps there's more transparency about what is coming and why.
Definitely.
Can I just interject real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
We're about halfway, and just to encourage people, if they have questions or something comes up and they have a burning desire to have an answer from Patti, then either raise your hand or just jump in, please.
Yeah, thanks. You should be able to unmute yourself, and if you don't want to appear on camera, keep your cameras off. But we enjoy looking at everybody's face. It makes it easier to have a conversation and answer questions. So we'll just give everybody a second. Doesn't sound like it. Okay, we're good.
I'm thinking, I want to hear what your examples are. I want to hear if we talked about
there's
patterns are.
There's some themes that we hear when we are doing in-community events and talking to farmers. And then I've been an agrologist, and I'm like 4th generation farming in Alberta. So like most of my community is farmers, right? So some common themes that you hear is like it's common for our kids to go off and go to school. And when they start having kids and get paired up, that's when they decide that they want to raise their kids in the same values as they were raised. And so often it's quite a big gap between when then they leave the farm, and then all of a sudden the farm becomes important to them and they want to come back. And so what I often hear and see is the mom and dad on the farm, they're doing their thing and they're like, you know what, we're getting close, we got good equity position, Arizona's calling us, like I'm headed out of here, we're gonna do this. And then the kid comes back and he's like wants to be involved. Well, not a lot of farms have a business model where they can say, oh, great, here you go, and walk away from it, right? And so then it becomes really complicated. And often if the one of the partners isn't been the primary, like there's a lot of farm businesses where the farmer is the farmer and the other one has the off-farm job. And so there can be a huge disconnect between what they're waiting for and what they want to do. And so somebody comes back, that multi-generational pressure might end up being that they're farming forever or continue farming in order to try and accommodate that new entrant into the farm. So that's a common theme. Another common theme would be the non-farming partner decides to take their half and go have fun anyway. And so there's a lot of that kind of conflicts that are happening right now, and we're seeing that throughout the prairies. And so I just, did you come across that in your, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, just when I think I've seen it all, I'll be surprised, right? There's all kinds of incarnations. I think that honestly, what you just described is addressed by what I was proposing. If you're having these conversations on a more regular basis about expectations, it's one of my favorite lines, right? People expect a lot, but they don't tell you what they expect. And so, the door is open if you want to come back, but here's the criteria. Because the reality is transition is a very expensive time for a farm. Mm-hmm. You are working often to take existing cash flow and divide it into multiples, right? Two or more other families. And you're looking at funding retirement or Arizona or whatever that looks like, as well as the new family and their own personal expectations that they established and their standards of living that they are coming from. And so I've had one mom and she said, I'm trying to talk to my kids about this and they just don't care. I'm like, you keep opening the door. You keep saying, you may not care about it right now, but here's the reality. And it's not about forcing it, but acknowledging that this is not just simple, it's complex and it takes time. The value of talking about it, certainly. And just saying, you know what, we would love for you to come back, but it's not unconditional. And so having a good language around what that could look like. As for partners and them parting ways, it is very challenging if you have not had alignment and plans that you are shared vision and plans for the future to try to force that at a later stage. It gets very complex. And sometimes paths are like that. And so I can't comment on the health of relationships of that. I would say the long-term culture of everything is sacrificed for the farm. Everything is sacrificed for the farm. That belief, every dollar goes back into the farm. Farm doesn't provide cash flow. The off-farm job does. That is a pattern I have absolutely seen. And for someone to acknowledge that perhaps that may wear thin would probably be wise.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's good. Those are some of the common themes that we get from our conversations, and it is important that we find the ways to support people through that. Another, I don't know how to segue this one. There's another common consideration is just around the idea of bringing in new ideas to the farm, like the younger generation coming in and the stoicism of the older generation. I know it can be really hard to acknowledge new ideas and a new direction for the farm and let go. And that acknowledgement that letting go means that's my baby, the business that I have built up, but also that your home and your heart and all of those memories with your family are also tied around that tractor and that house and that yard and that tree and that, that there's some really big heart things that come with farm transition.
Totally. Oh gosh, you just opened a huge topic because there is this desire to for a successor coming back to the farm in particular to exert and show their value, right? And often it comes across as a critique of the existing practices or what has been done traditionally. And so there's kind of two layers. So first of all, for a large percentage of the current farming generation, the owners right now, they came into the farm and the belief was the price of admission is blood, sweat, and tears. Work hard and trust us. This is all going to be yours one day. You don't need to know the details. We'll figure it out and let you know. That is archaic and unhelpful. It is not fruitful. It is not collaborative. It is not realistic. And it fails to acknowledge the need for development for this next leader. That's very firm, easy to say, hard to do. However, the other piece of the puzzle is that when the new ideas come in and there's resistance, it also highlights some really poor communication habits that families unfortunately tend to have. I would say we're not special, right? We all have our issues that we kind of trip on in our bad habits. But the phrase I think about is if we spoke to our friends the way we speak to our family, would we have any friends? We blow up at one another the way we would never blow up at someone else in terms of yelling, in terms of friction, stonewalling, just shutting down conversations altogether and ignoring them, in terms of not listening, in terms of venting to everybody except the person who actually has any control over it, right?
Yeah.
So all of these things, backing up the bus and taking a look at it. And I'll say on that topic in terms of communication, chapter 9 in the book lays it out quite clearly. But here's how we're behaving. There's a better way. And change is hard, but blowing up at each other is not going to be fruitful. We hurting each other, impacting each other, there's a better way. But we're tripping over things that are old. They tend to be. The other quote is, our family knows how to push our buttons because they installed them.
Yeah, isn't that the truth?
And so notice it.
Yeah.
You can't control the other person, but you can say, whew, that really got under my skin. That really got to me. There's something else going on, and stepping back and reflecting on that. But then also coming back and saying, so if I'm in a conversation with you, Linda, your response in that situation was really big. Can you help me understand what's going on for you right now? If we can have that language and open those conversations and be more curious and less judging, I think it's an important step that we can coach each other through. Because the junior partner, the person coming back, does have great ideas, but it does not negate the fact that the senior person has experience and has experienced hardships, that they learned some hard lessons as well, though it was from a different school. How can we respect each other? That's kind of the language and where we're trying to aim.
Perfect. That sounds really good.
No questions. Wow.
I know. Come on, people. You're leaving me out here. I went through my questions and now what am I supposed to say now?
No, we're all good. And that's not the case, but I think about these types of events are as good as the people in the room make it. So if there's questions or wonders about or specific scenarios, I'm open.
So maybe for farmers, what do you think are the top 3 things that you would encourage them to focus on if they're embarking on this process?
Good question. So the first key, I would say, is start. Get moving, do something. Meaning, kind of human nature when you are overwhelmed by something and are uncertain is what can I do to increase the likelihood of taking action? And so Stephen Covey says that begin with the end in mind. So when you start, the first day that you start the business is the day you should be thinking about exiting. And the next best day is today. So what do you need to be thinking about? Or if nothing else, what is your desired outcome? If you can start to paint a picture of what you hope for the future of, you know what, I would like to farm for my entire life at some level, though I would like to gradually wind that down. Hypothetically, that's one possibility. Or I want to go to Arizona in this year. By 2030, I would like to be in Arizona for 3 months each winter. Whatever that is, start to paint that picture. The same goes for the successor that's coming back. If we have not clearly defined that and actually spoken about it as a family, we think we're aiming the same place. I have yet to meet anybody who can read each other's minds, but in families, we seem to think we can. I've spoken to parents. What do your children want? This, and this. Really? How do you know? I just know. Have you spoken to them? No. We can do better. So I think about starting. I think about laying out that vision for the future and what that looks like. And I think about applying a bucket full of grace to the whole thing. This is complex. You have not done this before. Don't lose hope or be frustrated when you have some false starts, because it's going to happen. You will take some missteps. But thinking about who you need to have on your team to help you get there. It starts at home. That home team and what they are actually aiming for and working towards together is critical. And then what's supporting team members around that. I think that's more than 3. Sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you for that. And Bernadette has a question. So
please,
if you want to enable your mic, we'd love to hear it, Bernadette.
Do we have to enable her mic?
Oh.
Or...
Okay, I think I got it. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, so my husband and I farm. We have a beef cattle operation, breed around 300 cows. And our oldest son has always kind of been involved helping with the cropping in the spring and whatnot, and extra busy times. But he's been away from home. He has his own acreage about 3 miles from our own place, and he's a welder. But he's recently has voiced an interest in becoming more involved in the farm. The only kicker is, and we're not sure how to maneuver this, is our operation is a forage-based operation. Like, it's not grain land, and we've turned it into a productive cattle operation. But he kind of wants to do the grain farming, and we're not sure how to maneuver this.
Absolutely. I have several questions that we can't possibly unpack in a short period of time, but that would be my the first question, I guess, is are you confident and do you understand the current position and cash flow of your business in terms of its ability to support another family member completely?
Yeah, we're in 2 years, it will be in a very strong position to take on another member.
Okay, so that's excellent. And I the reason I say that, Bernadette, truly is just not every farm can succeed in terms of to another generation. There needs to be a threshold of capacity, and so that's kind of where I go with that. I would say I have more questions from a grain perspective. It would be in terms of shifting from forage to grain, and this is not my area of expertise, but it would be curiosity. Help me understand why you're thinking about this shift. What is driving this? Tell me more in terms of questions to him.
We're not really interested. My husband and I aren't. We're not. Part of our success has been we have focused more on extending our grazing, and we go with grazing corn and whatnot. I mean, we feed from a month to 2 weeks out of a winter. So I would say that, and we don't have a lot of equipment. We have our basic line of equipment to put up a little bit of hay and plant the corn crop. But he's more of an equipment guy and kind of always has been. Right. So we don't want to go. I mean, we're kind of trying to say, like, this isn't grain country.
Right. I think at the same time, though, if it's completely just shut down, for sure, this is your business, and you have that authority to say our preference is not to change, but convince us otherwise. What are we missing that perhaps you see potential for? And if he can build a business plan that has merit, that he could perhaps implement on his timeline, you can express that you're not interested in participating at this time, but that if that's something he wants to work towards, the risk I feel is by shutting it down completely, it negates that he is a capable individual in his own right. But you have your own assets that you have absolute right to exert control over, and you did it for good reason. But if you desire or require that it stays the same to be his, is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, we want to be open and include his perspective, like you were saying. But
yeah,
on the other side, we also know that with 30 years experience here, we know that it's not green land. It's forage land. It's cow land.
I respect that. So it's about giving him the space to do that math and to so looking at the potential grain production on that land versus the forage. But again, it comes down to the math of like what's feasible. And so to open that conversation, like I said, to be more curious in terms of, so you feel strongly that this is different. So you feel differently than we do. Like, let's explore this. And you can, I would encourage you to explore it with him, even if you know it's not what you want to be interested in. I think that's part of the exercise of business planning, is to genuinely explore the options. Have you taken a really deep look at it in recent years? Perhaps some factors have changed that would actually make it more appealing. And truly, you get to do you. You can tell them, no, go fly a kite. But in family relationships, part of building business acumen is informing ourselves well from good decisions. And I would imagine that could be helpful in what you're describing. And I'm wrong all the time. It's an observation. But I feel at times people are like, Patti, I need you to convince the other person they're wrong. And
that's extra.
It costs more.
It's not what and I'm not making light. Like we're like, you know, you need to convince my wife that we're not traveling to Arizona, or you need to convince my son that so if we genuinely are open, we're going to go the extra mile to help explore that possibility to make a truly informed decision on today's information.
Okay. So that investing in people's acumen and encouragement, that's really awesome.
No, I was just going to say that another thing that we were thinking of is, you know, if he can find his own quarter or two to rent and try that out first, and then if he can make it work, then bring it back and we can look at it. I'm just not sure how much we want to make that change without him discovering some on his own, I guess.
That'll be a great trial situation for sure. And I like that very much, because there's several things that he would be in a position that he would, once he's responsible for those bills himself, right? They talk about skin in the game. You perceive things differently when you have your own investment. So I think that instinct is a great one.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So we've got about 10 minutes left, and Lyle had a comment. He said, more of a statement than a question. A professional in this area can be helpful in assisting families through transition, but ultimately it requires all involved to commit to learning new skills. Skills like how to communicate in a healthy way, how to resolve conflict, what is my personality style, etc. Learning these skills is a lifelong journey. It takes a lot of work.
Amen.
Yeah.
I couldn't say it better. Thank you for that.
We have another question from Patti. She's one of the therapists on our Agno Farm Informed Therapist Network. So, Patti, go ahead.
Thanks. Hi there.
Hi.
Not sure if this is a question or what I'm trying to say really, but listening to Bernadette, it made me think about the importance of values and discussion around that. Specifically, and this isn't necessarily where Bernadette is coming from, of course, because I don't know any Bernadette, but for me, your story raises my personal feelings around the importance of protecting our fescue native grasslands, right? So I would be horrified if a child wanted to turn it all over to cropland or grain. So that would be a big piece for me personally in how do we talk about what we want the future of this place to look like, right? So not even quite sure what my question or comment is, but I guess it's about these other values outside of, just the financial.
I think you're right, and I think that what you highlight is important. Shared values, shared core values, are a really important foundation of family business in terms of it can be helpful in families, but when you're in business and you're really committing to it, it will allow you to pull in the same direction. Sometimes when values are that different, if it appears to be that's the realization, then that may not be a healthy arrangement to get involved in. Not everybody's meant to be in business with each other. It can be a hard realization, but it can save a lot of grief trying to force something that wasn't meant to be matched in the first place. And there were signals that indicated that. Simultaneously, I think digging into how Bernadette, and you happen to be the example, so forgive me, I keep using your name, but that your son does not align to the values of the farm that he grew up on. That would be interesting to understand why he feels differently.
So I kind of had the same sort of question that Andrew asked, but from a farm professional's standpoint, what would be the top 3 things that you would give as far as advice or takeaways to the farm professional that's struggling to work with family on farm transition and finding it really emotionally taxing to work with them? Any thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I have a lot of respect for mental health professionals in general and any clients they work with. And so I personally don't see agriculture as different, but I'm wrong all the time, like I said. What I would say is that I am aware that there are narratives at times within agriculture that are quite old and no longer accurate in terms of fear over, and you and I talked about this the other day, fear over land being taken. There were genuinely significant debt issues and very unique circumstances in the 1980s that left farms without any protection, and that has significantly changed since then. There are still commitments in terms of lending, and yet there are things that protect families differently than they once were. Now, that's not enough to make decisions, what I just said. But what I'm saying is that whenever there is a fear that is brought forward for anybody we're speaking with, I think it's pretty handy. Is this true? How do you know it's true? So my son wants to rip up all of our forage. Is that true? How do you know it's true? We're going to lose this land if the crop doesn't go well. Is that true? How do you know it's true? Whatever. My daughter-in-law, she's doing it on purpose. Is that true? How do you know it's true? So that practice of pausing and reflecting, the risk is if you're not familiar with the industry, you will accept whatever they're saying as kind of foreign and gospel. And our brains and minds tend to go to negative places, no matter where we're coming from and no matter what our circumstances are. And so agriculture provides incredible opportunities. It has served so many of us so well. It absolutely has risk and liabilities that are of concern and are not to be taken lightly. But there is incredible power in how we have raised our families and the communities that we have. And so to negate that isn't helpful either.
Awesome. That's good. So I think we have our evaluation going up in the chat there, Andrew. So if you guys could fill that out for us, it really helps us with our funding and directing what our next webinars look like. And there's a chance to win one of Patty's books. So please fill that out. Again, this is the second of a 3-part series. So our next one will be on March 26th from 1 to 2, and it's with Diane McKenzie. And so we'll be looking at sharing her research highlighting the unique contributions of women to agriculture, specifically related to the intergenerational farm transfer. And as the only sibling in my family that is still farming and did not have an opportunity to have a conversation about farm transition, I'm really excited and interested to hear what Diane has to share with us. So, Patti, I really appreciate your time and the insight in your book and your positive attitude. I love that. I love the encouragement for all of our professionals to not like back away from those touchy emotions, but to just give them space and let them talk about it and use those as cues of where we need to go next. And this has been a really good conversation. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
I have one last burning question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if a family is in this process and they're really stuck, apart from obviously buying your book, what would your parting words be?
I think that if you have the instinct that there's a level of fragility or vulnerability or just cannot get unstuck, the instincts to reach out and seek some help in terms of coaching, in terms of facilitating, it's reasonable that some help to be able to have the conversation when there's just so much riding on it and it's such a heavy topic that people become afraid of. It's reasonable that you could want some help with that. And there are resources available, and certainly I can refer people. I do a limited amount of it myself. I don't have a cloning program, working on that, but certainly there's the ability to have someone that doesn't have skin in the game, that doesn't have to come to Christmas dinner, but can be a neutral voice at the table and help people get through a conversation can be really powerful. And so if that's your instinct, I encourage you to reach out and we'll connect some dots.
And there is that's one of the goals of Agno is to pull together a directory of people that have an understanding of the feelings and the facts, and to build that network of connections between them so that it's easier to find those referrals. And that's what our whole community of practice project is about. And it's happening over the next 3 years. So anybody that's interested in tagging along with us for that conversation and for that learning bits, please reach out to us, subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll continue to post updates and ways that you can be engaged with us. Our biggest goal is to finding a or a therapist or an accountant or a business professional. It's all really tricky. They market themselves based on what they know about themselves and who they are, but not necessarily on the issues that you're trying to solve. So it can be really hard to navigate that big, long list. I don't know if you've ever been to the Canadian Association of Farm Advisors directory. There is such a list of different professional types. It's really hard to know which one is the one that is going to serve me or that's going to help me. And so our goal is to flip that directory on its head and actually start with the question and what the client is looking for, and have a way of sifting through that and coming up with professionals, either the titles or the people that have been involved with us. So if you're interested in being a part of that, it's going to be a few years in the development. Please tag along with us through subscribing and participate as we have opportunity. So thanks again, everybody. We got to get off this. I have another call, so I gotta go to the next one. I'm getting
Thank you, Patti.
messages.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Be well, everyone.